A city of 30,000 people thrived in a desert that sees just a few days of rain each year. This is Petra, the rose-red wonder carved from Jordanian cliffs. Its secret was not magic, but a hidden masterpiece of engineering. An entire civilization conquered one of the most hostile environments on Earth by mastering a single, scarce resource: water. By the end of this exploration, you will understand the 10 ingenious principles that allowed Petra to flourish, principles that could reshape how we tackle water scarcity today. How did they turn violent floods into a reliable lifeline? What forgotten knowledge kept this desert metropolis alive for centuries? What does the silence of its ancient pipes warn us about our own fragile systems? When you think of human ingenuity, what story of survival truly changes your perspective on what is possible? The desert is a place of brutal contradictions. Beneath a relentless sun, daytime temperatures can scorch past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while nights plunge into a profound chill. Rain is a rare and fickle visitor, perhaps only 5 or 6 days a year. Yet when those clouds finally break, they do not offer a gentle blessing. They unleash a torrent. Dry riverbeds called wadis transform in minutes into raging walls of water, mud, and rock, sweeping away anything in their path. For any civilization, this presented a cruel paradox. Water was the singular key to life, but here it was either absent or arriving with catastrophic force. The Nabateans did not just face a scarcity problem, they faced a control problem. Their survival hinged on a radical shift in perspective. They had to stop seeing the desert's flash floods as a destructive enemy and start seeing them as their only possible ally. This was the first and perhaps greatest of their innovations, a fundamental reimagining of the problem itself. The challenge was no longer about finding a hidden oasis. It was about designing an entire city to become one. Every cliff, every canyon, every square foot of stone had to become part of a system to capture, tame, and hoard that fleeting, furious bounty. The genius of Petra begins not with a shovel, but with a vision, seeing the desert's greatest threat as its only gift. Their story begins not with grand palaces, but with footprints in the sand. The Nabateans were originally nomadic merchants, masters of the vast, empty spaces between empires. For generations, their wealth came from guiding incense, spices, and silks along the perilous caravan routes of the Arabian Peninsula. This was their first, crucial education. To survive those journeys, they had to memorize the desert's hidden language, the subtle dip in the land that signaled a buried spring, the specific type of rock that hinted at groundwater, the way a canyon curved to funnel the rare rain. They were not just traders, they were expert geologists and meteorologists long before those titles existed. When they chose to settle at Petra, it was not a random decision. It was the culmination of this deep, generational knowledge. They saw in those narrow, towering gorges something others missed: a perfect, natural catchment basin. The very cliffs that provided defense also channeled every drop of water from a vast, surrounding plateau directly toward them. They leveraged their understanding of trade routes into an understanding of watersheds. In doing so, they performed an incredible alchemy. They transformed the most precious commodity on the Silk Road from the goods being carried to the water that made carrying them possible. By controlling the desert's only lifeline, Petra became an indispensable oasis. A caravan could risk the journey from Damascus only if it knew with certainty that at Petra there would be water, safety, and a market. This control of water became the true foundation of their political and economic empire. It was a silent, invisible form of power, more potent than any army. To build this system, they began with what we might call their first principle, one born from their nomadic past: comprehensive observation. Before moving a single stone, they spent years, perhaps decades, simply watching. They learned to read the terrain like a map of future floods. Where did the water want to go? Which slopes collected the most sun and thus the most evaporation? Where did the rock naturally crack or seep? Their entire hydraulic civilization was built not on forcing the landscape to change, but on listening to it first. This patient, profound dialogue with the desert set the stage for every engineering marvel that followed. This deep observation was the first stroke on their blueprint. The Nabateans became master cartographers of an invisible terrain, reading the desert's subtle language with a skill we have nearly forgotten. They did not see a barren cliff face. They saw a page in a hydrological textbook. A dark stain on the rock was not just discoloration, it was a history of mineral-rich seepage, a potential source. A hairline fracture running down a canyon wall was not a flaw, but a future pipeline, a natural conduit they could widen and direct. The gentle slope of a wadi bed told them exactly where the water's energy would be greatest during a flood, and where it would deposit its precious silt. Their entire engineering project began with this comprehensive, years-long survey. Teams would have fanned out across the vast plateau surrounding Petra, mapping every dip and rise, every drainage line and natural basin. They were not just looking for where water was, but for where it would go. They needed to understand the entire catchment area, every square mile of rock that would shed rainfall into Petra's gorges. This was a fusion of hard-won empirical data and generations of accumulated desert lore passed down from their nomadic ancestors. It was science and storytelling woven into one. They knew, for instance, that a certain type of reddish sandstone was more porous and would hold water like a sponge, while a denser gray limestone would shed it quickly, creating faster runoff. This knowledge allowed them to predict flow with astonishing accuracy. Their work teaches a profound, timeless lesson. Before you can master an environment, you must first learn to listen to it. Their greatest innovation was not a dam or a pipe, but this philosophy of cooperation. They built with the landscape, not simply upon it. And once this map was drawn in their minds, they were ready for their next, most audacious move. They would not wait for the water to come to them. They would reach out and grab it from the very sky. The culmination of their observation was a structure of breathtaking, dual-purpose genius. To enter the lost city of Petra, every visitor, from humble merchant to visiting royalty, had to pass through a crack in the earth. This is a winding, natural gorge over a kilometer long, with walls soaring 200 feet high in places, so narrow that in spots the sky is reduced to a thin, blue ribbon far above. It is one of the most dramatic entrances to any city ever built, but the Nabateans saw this majestic canyon as far more than a grand gateway. They saw it as the perfect, pre-built aqueduct. Carved directly into the northern wall of running its entire sinuous length, is a narrow channel. In some sections, it is a simple groove cut into the living rock. In others, where the wall curves or falls away, it becomes a raised aqueduct of fitted stone, clinging to the cliff face. This was not a rushed or haphazard construction. Its slope is a masterpiece of precision engineering, dropping only about 1 meter over its entire course. This gentle, consistent gradient was calculated with incredible care. Too steep and the water would rush through with destructive force, eroding the channel and arriving in a turbulent, muddy surge. Too flat, and it would stagnate, allowing silt to settle and block the flow. This perfect slope allowed the water to move with a calm, steady purpose, a silent river in the sky, mirroring the procession of camels and people far below. The channel did more than just transport water, it also cleaned it. At strategic intervals, the Nabateans carved deep, rectangular settling basins into the channel's floor. As the water slowed to enter these wider pools, The heavy silt, sand, and debris carried from the distant hills would sink to the bottom. A sluice gate at the far end would then allow the now clear water to continue its journey, while the accumulated sediment could be periodically removed. This meant the water arriving in Petra's heart was not just a trickle of survival, but a reliable flow of clarity. The thus became a perfect fusion of sacred geography and practical engineering. For the traveler, it was a spiritual procession, a narrowing of the world that built awe before revealing the magnificent treasury. For the city, it was a literal lifeline, a testament to a civilization that understood that the most vital infrastructure could be woven seamlessly into the very bones of the landscape. The water flowing through that stone vein was the city's lifeblood, and there was its unwavering artery, but capturing that water was only half the battle. Our modern instinct is to grab water quickly, to pump it from the ground or funnel it into pipes and reservoirs at maximum speed. The Nabateans understood something more profound. In a desert, speed is the enemy. Water moved too fast is water lost, evaporated by the sun, swallowed by the porous earth, or wasted in a destructive torrent. Their second principle was the art of slowing water down. This was a philosophy of patience, a deliberate counterintuitive approach that transformed a fleeting event into a lasting resource. Across the vast, rocky plateaus upstream from Petra, you can still find the subtle fingerprints of this strategy. They constructed low, wide barriers of mortared stone, often just 1 or 2 feet high, stretching across minor drainages and shallow valleys. These were not grand dams meant to hold back lakes. They were micro-dams, gentle speed bumps for the desert's runoff. When a rainstorm came, water would flow down these slopes, hit these walls, and simply pause. Its speed dropped to almost nothing. In that moment of stillness, 3 miraculous things happened. First, the heavier silt and organic matter suspended in the water settled out behind the wall. This wasn't just debris, it was fertile topsoil, the very essence of life, being deliberately deposited. Second, the pooled water would seep slowly, deeply, into the ground beneath, recharging the aquifer rather than skimming uselessly across the surface. And third, that moisture would linger, creating a hidden reservoir of damp earth that could sustain plant roots long after the surface had dried. Over years and decades, this repeated process would build up deep, fertile pockets of soil in what was once barren rock. They were not just capturing water, they were capturing land itself. They were manufacturing small, resilient oases from nothing but stone, patience, and an understanding of physics. This principle of slowing and spreading turned the landscape into a giant, spongy catchment system. Every minor flood became a gentle irrigation event, a deposit into the Earth's savings account. It prevented the catastrophic erosion that follows fast water, and it created a diffuse, decentralized web of moisture that supported vegetation and stabilized the entire ecosystem. Their genius lay in recognizing that abundance in the desert isn't about a single, gushing source. It's about countless tiny moments of retention, spread across time and space, adding up to sustained life. The sound would have been terrifying, a deep, growing roar echoing through the canyons long before the water was seen. From the high plateaus, a single thunderstorm could unleash a wall of muddy water 20 feet high, charging down the narrow wadis with the force to crush stone and sweep away entire caravans. This was the desert's most violent mood, and the Nabateans knew they could not hide from it. Their survival depended on facing it head-on, with a network of stone sentinels built to negotiate with the flood. Across the landscape, they constructed a hierarchy of dams, each with a specific, intelligent purpose. Small diversion dams, often just a few meters high, were placed inside canyons. Their job was subtle but critical. to gently steer a portion of the raging torrent away from vulnerable areas and into prepared infiltration galleries or storage basins, taking the edge off the flood's main force. But their masterpieces were the Great Barrier Dams. The most famous once stood right at the very entrance to the sacred gateway to the city. This was not a wall meant to completely stop the impossible power of a desert flash flood. That would have been a recipe for catastrophic failure. Instead, it was designed as a massive hydraulic moderator. Its sloping face, built with meticulously interlocked stones, would deflect and split the oncoming wave, absorbing its energy and funneling a controlled portion of the water into the carved channel along the wall. The rest would be safely diverted around the city's perimeter through engineered spillways. The engineering was deceptively sophisticated. These dams were founded not on loose soil, but on bedrock, anchored deep to resist being undermined. Their spillways were carefully calculated, wide enough to handle immense volume, but shaped to maintain a flow that would not erode the dam's base. They were converting a chaotic, destructive event into a scheduled, managed harvest. It was the ultimate form of proactive risk management. They weren't just hoping the flood wouldn't destroy them. They were ensuring that when it came, it would put itself to work. Every crashing wave was transformed into a deliberate delivery of life, its fury dissipated into usefulness. This calm, calculated negotiation with raw natural power stands as one of their most profound lessons. They understood that resilience isn't about building a higher wall against chaos, but about designing a smarter channel for its energy. Yet for all their brilliance in capturing and calming the water, the Nabateans faced the desert's ultimate, silent adversary, the sun. In that dry, scorching air, a pool of water left in the open could vanish into the sky in a matter of days, a precious resource lost to evaporation. Their grand system of channels and dams would mean nothing if they could not store the harvest, so they turned the city itself into a vast, hidden bank vault. Carved directly into the very cliffs that housed their tombs and temples are hundreds of cisterns, some small enough for a single family, others large enough to hold the water for an entire neighborhood. These were not simple holes in the ground. They were masterpieces of subterranean engineering designed with one relentless purpose: to defy evaporation. Each cistern was meticulously shaped, often bottle-shaped with a narrow neck that flared out into a wide, rounded chamber deep within the rock. This narrow opening was then sealed with a fitted stone lid or a slab of sandstone. The effect was profound. It created a dark, cool, still environment where water could rest for months, even years, with minimal loss. The interior walls were then coated with multiple layers of a special, waterproof plaster made from lime and crushed pottery. This lining was the final, crucial barrier, ensuring not a single drop would seep back into the thirsty stone, but their genius extended to the plumbing. Each cistern was part of a smart network. Inlet channels, often hidden and sloped, would direct water from terrace runoff or a main aqueduct into the tank. Outlet pipes, set a few inches above the cistern floor, would allow clear water to be drawn off while leaving any settled silt behind as a sediment trap. Some of the largest public cisterns could hold over 1 million gallons, a staggering volume for an arid environment. This was the city's strategic reserve, its water battery. Historians estimate that Petra's total storage capacity could have sustained its population for 1, perhaps even 2 years without a single new drop of rain. This transformed their relationship with time. A drought was not an immediate crisis, it was a planned-for event. The knowledge that these reserves existed in the rock provided a profound psychological and social stability, allowing trade, culture, and governance to flourish uninterrupted. And in a final stroke of strategic wisdom, most of these cisterns were discreet. They were carved into cliff faces, tucked behind buildings, or buried beneath courtyards. This hidden geography served a dual purpose. It protected the water from the relentless sun, and it also protected it from potential enemies. An invading army could march through and see a magnificent city, but without knowing where the water was stored, they could not easily seize or poison the true source of its power. The lifeblood of Petra was not in the open, sparkling in fountains for all to see. It was held in the cool, dark silence of the stone, a guarded secret that made the desert bloom. This entire hydraulic symphony played out without a single pump, gear, or slave turning a water wheel. The Nabateans' third principle was to let an invisible, universal force do all the work: gravity. Their entire network, from the distant highland dams to the cisterns deep beneath the city streets, was a masterpiece of passive design. Water flowed because it had somewhere lower to go, and the Nabateans spent generations learning how to speak gravity's language with perfect fluency. This required a surveying skill that borders on the mystical. To move water gently across miles of broken terrain, they had to calculate gradients with breathtaking precision. A slope too steep would turn their channels into erosive torrents, scouring away the very stone that carried the water. A slope too shallow would let the flow stagnate, allowing silt to choke the conduit. Their solution was a continuous, gentle fall, often as little as 1 foot of drop for every 1,000 feet of distance. Achieving this over natural rock, through winding canyons and across gaps, was an exercise in supreme patience and geometry. They used simple but effective tools, likely citing rods and water-filled trenches to establish true level, to map these imperceptible declines across the landscape. But they didn't just build a single, perfect slope and call it done. They engineered intelligent interventions along the way. At points where the terrain naturally fell away too sharply, they built drop structures, essentially small, stepped waterfalls made of stone. These structures dissipated the water's energy in a controlled, cascading tumble, preventing it from gaining destructive speed. Elsewhere, they employed sluice gates, not just for settling basins, but as flow regulators. By raising or lowering a wooden or stone gate in a channel, they could finely tune the velocity and volume moving through any given branch of their network, prioritizing different neighborhoods or storage tanks as needed. The result was a system that operated in near silence, powered by nothing but the Earth's own pull. It required no external energy to run, no fuel to gather, and no complex machinery to maintain. It was sustainable in the most literal sense. It sustained itself through an elegant understanding of physical laws. This whispers of a profound harmony between their civilization and the fundamental rules of the universe. They built not against nature's grain, but along its contours. In an age where we often solve problems by adding more energy, more complexity, and more moving parts, their gravity-fed network stands as a quiet testament to the elegance of working with the world as it is. It invites a simple, powerful question for our own sprawling, energy-intensive infrastructure. What if our solutions were designed not to fight gravity, but to follow its gentle, relentless lead? But gravity needed a source, a constant pulse to set the entire system in motion. For that, the Nabateans looked beyond the flash floods to a deeper, more ancient mystery. Several kilometers from the city's heart, nestled in a rugged hillside, a spring of cool, clear water bubbles from the rock. This is the Spring of Moses. According to local tradition stretching back, this is the very spot where the prophet Moses struck a stone with his staff, bringing forth water for the Israelites during their exodus. Whether the Nabateans shared this exact biblical story is unknown, but they undoubtedly recognized the profound power of such a place. A perennial spring in the desert is not just a resource, it is a miracle. They understood that to control a city's water was to wield political power, but to connect that water to the divine was to wield something far deeper, the human soul. So they wove the spring into their spiritual fabric, attributing its life-giving flow to the favor of their own deities, like the powerful god. This was of cultural engineering. By linking their most critical infrastructure to sacred narrative, they transformed practical necessity into a covenant. Water was not merely managed, it was a divine gift, and its careful stewardship became a sacred duty. This belief system reinforced social order, ensuring everyone from farmer to king respected and protected the water system, for to waste it was to insult the gods themselves. Of course, reverence alone could not pipe the water to Petra. The spring's location, while spiritually significant, posed a serious logistical challenge. It lay outside the main catchment area, its flow too precious to leave to chance. So the Nabateans applied their full engineering skill to this sacred source. They constructed a capture basin right at the spring's mouth, a stone chamber to collect every emerging drop. From there, they embarked on one of their most audacious underground projects. They carved a tunnel. Not a rough hole, but a precise, navigable conduit through the living rock, large enough for a person to enter and maintain. This tunnel, over a kilometer long, served a brilliant dual purpose. It protected the water from evaporation and contamination as it traveled across the open landscape, and it also hid the source's exact origin and path, a strategic secret. This hidden channel then merged seamlessly with the main aqueduct running along blending the mystical, constant flow with the captured floodwaters from the hills. The spring's water, believed to be blessed, would mix with the harvested rain, a literal and symbolic confluence of the divine and the engineered. Control of this integrated system cemented more than just survival, it cemented authority. The priesthood, who interpreted the will of the gods, and the monarchy, who commanded the engineers, became the joint custodians of this holy lifeline. Their power flowed as surely as the water through drawn from a spring that was both a geological fact and a foundational myth. In Petra, the line between the temple and the reservoir was beautifully, intentionally blurred. The true measure of their system was not in the grand dams or the sacred spring, but in the final few feet. After the water completed its long, gravity-fed journey through it reached the city's heart and faced its ultimate challenge, the last mile. Here, the Nabateans engineered a capillary network of astonishing complexity, a web of distribution that wove water into the very fabric of daily life. From the main channel, smaller conduits branched off like arteries, some carved into street-side curbs, others made from precisely fitted pipes, each with a calculated slope to maintain that gentle, consistent flow. These secondary lines snaked through neighborhoods, delivering a direct, reliable supply to public fountains, to the courtyards of wealthy merchants, and likely to the doorsteps of more modest homes as well. Archaeological evidence points to a surprisingly egalitarian access for a city of its time. While the elite certainly had private cisterns and ornate pools, the widespread presence of public fountains and shared neighborhood basins suggests clean water was not a luxury hoarded by the few, but a managed resource available to the many. This was no accident, it was the result of sophisticated civic administration. Inscriptions and records from similar Nabatean sites hint at a formal system of water taxation and strict maintenance codes. Users paid for their access, and those funds were dedicated to the perpetual upkeep of the channels, the clearing of silt traps, and the repair of any breach. This created a self-sustaining cycle. The water system generated the revenue needed to preserve itself, ensuring its survival across generations. Imagine the scene this network made possible. In the paved plaza before the great temple, a monumental fountain would have cascaded, its sound a constant, cooling murmur against the desert silence. These fountains were far more than decorative. They were vital social hubs, places to gather, draw water, and exchange news in the shade. The pipes also fed elaborate garden courtyards within temple complexes and wealthy villas, where trees, vines, and flowers bloomed in defiance of the surrounding barrenness. This lushness was the ultimate symbol of Nabatean power, not just control over water, but the ability to command the aesthetic of an oasis, to create beauty from utility. The entire city, from its grandest monument to its most humble lane, was hydrated by this silent, underground river. It was a living organism, its stone veins ensuring that the life captured from distant storms and sacred springs reached every corner, turning a collection of desert dwellings into a truly thriving, resilient metropolis. This capillary action meant that, for a Nabatean citizen, the miracle was not a distant spectacle. It was the cool water in a clay jar, the green vine on a courtyard wall, the meeting place at the neighborhood spout. Their greatest engineering achievement became utterly, beautifully ordinary. This intricate web of pipes and channels reveals their fourth, and perhaps most forward-thinking, principle: multi-layered redundancy. The Nabateans understood that in an environment as harsh and unpredictable as the desert, putting all your water in one basket was a recipe for collapse. So they designed their entire system as a mesh, a network where every source, every channel, and every storage point had a backup. If one path was blocked, water could find another. If one cistern ran dry, others in the network could take up the slack. This wasn't just good engineering, it was a philosophy of resilience, a recognition that systems must be built to withstand the unexpected. You can see this genius in the very bones of the. Alongside the main carved channel in the northern wall, archaeologists have found evidence of a second, sometimes even a third, conduit. These weren't all used simultaneously. Instead, they served as parallel options. If the primary channel became clogged with debris from a particularly violent flood, or if it required maintenance, the flow could be temporarily diverted to one of these secondary lines without the city ever noticing an interruption. The water just kept coming. This principle repeated at every scale. Across the city, they didn't build one massive central reservoir. They built clusters of cisterns, dozens of them, carved into different cliff faces and distributed across neighborhoods. A family might have a small private cistern, but they were also served by a larger public one nearby. This distribution served multiple purposes. It minimized the distance water had to be carried daily, but more importantly, it localized risk. A crack or contamination in one cistern would not cripple an entire district. The system could isolate the problem and keep functioning. Their water sources were equally. They relied on the perennial spring, yes, but they did not depend on it alone. That sacred source was supplemented by the entire captured runoff from the surrounding plateaus, a completely separate and renewable supply. In a prolonged drought, the spring's steady flow would become critical. In a normal year, the floodwater would replenish the cisterns and spare the spring. They even harnessed a third, often overlooked source: groundwater. Through cleverly placed infiltration galleries and tunnels, they could tap into shallow aquifers, adding yet another layer to their hydrological safety net. This multi-layered approach made Petra's water system almost fault-tolerant. An earthquake might crack one dam, but others upstream would still function. A landslide could block a canyon, but water would find a new path through prepared spillways. Even deliberate sabotage would have been incredibly difficult, as disabling any single point would not stop the flow. The lifeblood of the city flowed through not one artery, but a vast, interconnected circulatory system. In our modern world, we often build for maximum efficiency, creating streamlined networks where a single point of failure can cause cascading collapse. The Nabateans built for maximum resilience, accepting a little complexity in exchange for enduring stability. Their silent, stone network asks us a quiet question. Is our own civilization's lifeline, our grids, our supply chains, our data, designed with such graceful, redundant strength, the stone veins of Petra did not end at the city's grand facades. They pulsed outward, transforming the very desert beyond the cliffs into a green, beating heart. For too long, Petra has been frozen in our imagination as a city of the dead, a spectacular necropolis carved for eternity. But the truth is far more vibrant. Petra was a city of the living, and its lifeblood flowed into fields, orchards, and vineyards that covered the surrounding plateaus. The Nabateans were not just urban engineers, they were agricultural alchemists, using their diverted water to perform the desert's ultimate magic. They grew food. Across the highlands to the north and west of the city, archaeologists have mapped vast, intricate systems of terraced fields. These were not haphazard plots. They were carefully engineered steps carved into the hillsides, each level held back by a retaining wall of mortared stone. The genius of these terraces was their simplicity. They did one job perfectly. They stopped the precious topsoil from being washed away in the next flood. Instead, they captured it, creating deep, fertile beds that could hold moisture and nurture roots. Canals and clay pipes branched off from the main aqueducts, delivering a measured flow to these highland gardens. The water was not poured wastefully, but managed with precision, likely using sluice gates and time-based sharing agreements among farming communities. This was a calculated, landscape-scale irrigation project that turned barren rock into arable land. The evidence of what grew there is etched into the earth itself. Soil analysis has revealed chemical signatures of grapes, olives, figs, and grains like wheat and barley. On the ground, you can still find the remains of ancient planting pits and the faint traces of field boundaries. This was not subsistence farming. This was boutique agriculture. The Nabateans were cultivating cash crops and staples that could thrive in a managed arid environment. Imagine the view from the high tombs, not a monochrome expanse of sand and stone, but a patchwork of green terraces stepping down the slopes, shimmering in the heat, a living tapestry woven with water. This agricultural hinterland fundamentally changed Petra's equation of power. While the city's wealth was famously built on the incense trade, this local food production created a crucial buffer, a form of edible security. It reduced their dependency on long, vulnerable caravan routes for basic sustenance. In times of political conflict or when trade routes shifted, Petra could feed itself. The city was no longer just a glorified caravanserai. It was a true garden city, a self-sustaining core that nourished its population from within its own managed landscape. The water that began as a flash flood in a distant canyon ended as the juice in a grape, the oil in an olive, the bread in a family's home. In this seamless flow from hydraulic engineering to horticulture, we see the full circle of Nabatean genius. They didn't just store water in cisterns. They stored it in the very biology of their land, creating a resilient, flourishing oasis that was as much a feat of agronomy as it was of architecture. Yet even the most resilient systems are not immune to the slow turning of history's wheel. Petra's water network, a masterpiece of passive design, had one critical vulnerability. It was not a flaw in the engineering, but in its very nature. It required constant, careful, knowledgeable care. For centuries, that care was a sacred ritual, woven into the city's identity. But when that ritual was broken, the silence that followed was profound. The first major shift came not with a cataclysm, but with a change in political maps. In 106 AD, the Roman Empire formally annexed the Nabatean kingdom. On the surface, Petra thrived under Rome. New colonnaded streets were built, grand Roman-style temples rose. But this integration came with a hidden cost. The Romans were masters of aqueducts, but their approach was different, often centralized and monumental. More critically, the very source of Petra's wealth began to dry up. Roman emperors prioritized different trade routes, especially maritime paths via the Red Sea. The caravans that had made Petra indispensable grew fewer, their lucrative cargoes bypassing the desert crossroads. With declining commercial prominence, the immense tax revenue and civic focus needed to maintain the vast, decentralized water system likely began to wane. The specialized guilds of hydrologists, the maintenance crews who knew every settling basin and sluice gate by touch and tradition, may have found their skills less valued. Their knowledge slowly not passed to the next generation. The system began to suffer from a kind of institutional amnesia. Then, in 363 AD, the earth itself rebelled. A massive earthquake, one of the most powerful in the region's recorded history, struck with violent force. The tremors would have shattered the delicate gradients of the aqueducts. They collapsed cliffside channels, fractured cistern linings, and dislodged the meticulously placed stones of diversion dams. This was a blow the weakened city could not fully recover from. Without the deep reservoir of Nabatean hydraulic expertise, repairs would have been patchwork, a temporary fix instead of a full restoration. The earthquake did not destroy Petra, but it crippled its nervous system. A final, silent killer was always waiting. Silt, the very system designed to capture it, ultimately succumbed to it. Each flood deposited its tiny tribute in the channels and settling basins. For centuries, teams had diligently cleared this sediment, a never-ending task essential to the flow. As maintenance rituals faded, this process slowed, then stopped. Silt accumulated, clogging the arteries. Water that could not flow pooled and evaporated or found new, destructive paths outside the engineered channels. Gradually, the lifeblood of the city thickened, then stopped. The gardens on the high terraces withered. The public fountains in the plaza fell silent. One by one, the cisterns emptied, their cool darkness replaced by dry, stale air. The desert, held at bay for so long, began its patient reclamation. Sand drifted into the once careful channels became mere cracks in the rock, their purpose forgotten. What had been a thriving metropolis of 30,000 slowly dwindled. People left not in a single exodus, but in a gradual, relentless trickle, seeking places where water still flowed without such demanding knowledge. By the early Middle Ages, Petra was largely a ghost, known only to local Bedouin tribes, its stone veins empty, its story swallowed by the sands. This is the ultimate cautionary tale written in stone and silence. Petra did not fall to a conquering army, it was not sacked or burned. It succumbed to a broken cycle of care. Its infrastructure, for all its genius, was not self-sustaining. It required a culture that understood it, a society that invested in it, and a continuous line of hands that knew how to listen to its whispers. When that chain of knowledge was severed, the water stopped, and the desert's long-delayed victory was complete. It asks us a haunting question about our own vast, invisible networks. What fragile knowledge sustains our world? And what happens if we forget how to listen? The silent, silt-filled channels of Petra hold a final, unsettling lesson. For all their stone and mortar, the true foundation of this hydraulic marvel was not a physical material. It was something far more fragile, yet far more powerful: living, communal knowledge. The Nabateans' fifth principle was the understanding that sustainable technology is inseparable from the culture that sustains it. Their system was a living library written in landscape, and it required a society of fluent readers. This knowledge was not held in a single scroll or by a lone engineer. It was a distributed intelligence passed down through generations of specialists. Stonemasons knew which rock would best hold a channel's curve without cracking. Hydrologists could predict a season's flow by reading subtle weather signs and the behavior of local plants. Maintenance crews memorized every settling basin and sluice gate, understanding the unique silt patterns of each tributary canyon. This was a deep, localized wisdom, earned through patient observation and hands-on practice. It was the intangible software that made the magnificent hardware function. When that chain of mentorship and practice was broken by political shifts, economic decline, or disaster, the physical network, for all its genius, became a beautiful, useless relic. We see this pattern echoed throughout history, a quiet tragedy of forgotten know-how. In our own time, we have witnessed a rapid erosion of traditional agricultural knowledge, where understanding of local soil cycles and heirloom seeds is lost to industrial monoculture. Master artisans in fields from woodworking to textile dyeing hold volumes of tactile, material wisdom that evaporates when no apprentice comes to learn. These are not just nostalgic losses, they are reductions in our collective resilience, a narrowing of the ways we know how to solve problems. This forces a crucial question about our modern world. Our systems are infinitely more complex than Petra's gravity-fed channels. We rely on vast electrical grids, global supply chains, and digital networks that few individuals fully comprehend. But is our operational wisdom as resilient as theirs once was? Our knowledge is often highly concentrated, held by a small number of experts or locked within proprietary corporate systems. What happens if that concentrated knowledge is disrupted, or if the basic skills to maintain foundational systems, like repairing local infrastructure or understanding food cultivation, fade from common awareness? Petra's story suggests that the most vulnerable part of any system is not its pipes or its wires, but the shared memory of how to care for it. A sustainable technology, therefore, cannot be designed in a lab and simply installed. It must be woven into the fabric of community, taught, practiced, and valued across generations. The ultimate hidden water system of Petra was not carved in stone, but carried in the minds and hands of its people. When that river of knowledge ran dry, everything else followed. The story of Petra's water was nearly lost to the desert's patient silence. For centuries after its decline, the city was known to the outside world only through cryptic mentions in ancient texts and the guarded stories of Bedouin tribes. To early European explorers in the 1800s, it appeared exactly as the sands had left it, a breathtaking necropolis, a city of tombs seemingly built for eternity, yet utterly devoid of life. They marveled at the facades but missed the veins. The true miracle of Petra lay buried, not in treasure, but in dust and forgotten function. The rediscovery of its hydraulic heart began not with a single dramatic find, but with a slow, meticulous shift in perspective. Archaeologists started to ask a different kind of question. They stopped looking only at what was carved for the gods and began searching for what was built for the people. The clues were subtle, a faint, continuous groove running along the base of the wall. A strange, symmetrical depression in a courtyard floor, a line of darker stone snaking across a distant plateau. These were the faded pencil lines of a grand blueprint. Researchers began to walk the wadis, not as tourists, but as detectives, tracing the paths water would have taken. They consulted ancient Nabataean inscriptions that spoke of water rights and maintenance. Slowly, a map of intention emerged from the landscape. The real breakthrough, however, came from seeing beneath the surface. Modern tools like ground-penetrating radar allowed teams to scan the Earth without moving a single stone. The radar waves revealed ghostly outlines hidden below, the precise shapes of buried cisterns, the straight, confident lines of clay pipelines running beneath streets, the outlines of diversion walls swallowed by silt. It was like developing a photographic negative of the city's circulatory system. Each scan added another piece to the puzzle. One of the most poignant discoveries came from a seemingly mundane task: clearing a blocked channel. As archaeologists carefully removed centuries of compacted sediment from a conduit near the city center, they made a startling find. At the bottom, preserved in the cool, dark dryness, were the actual tools of the maintainers: a simple ceramic cup, perhaps used to scoop a drink during a long day of work, and a worn stone hammer left behind, as if its owner intended to return the next morning. In that moment, the abstract system became personal. It was no longer just engineering. It was the quiet, daily labor of individuals whose names are lost, but whose handiwork endured. Another team, investigating a sealed cistern mentioned in a local legend, carefully removed its capstone. Inside, they did not find treasure, but something arguably more valuable: a deep pool of ancient, still water. Though stagnant, its very presence was a direct message across time, proving the cistern's perfect, enduring seal. Each of these finds, from a radar anomaly to a forgotten tool, was a whisper from the past, slowly coalescing into a clear voice. This painstaking work has fundamentally revolutionized our understanding of Petra. We no longer see a dead city of monuments. We see a living, breathing, engineered organism. Every cliff, every canyon, every stone was part of a single, integrated purpose. The tombs and temples were not separate from the water system. They were its beneficiaries, its proud declarations of stability made possible by the hidden flow. This rediscovery forces us to look at every ancient ruin with new eyes. What other invisible networks of sustenance, what other forgotten genius of daily life lies buried just beneath our feet? Waiting for the right question to bring it back to light, the silent lessons of Petra are not confined to history books. They are echoing across the world's driest regions today, where communities and engineers are reaching for the same ancient principles to write a new chapter of survival. In the arid state of Rajasthan, India, a modern revival of a 3,000-year-old practice is turning back the clock on desertification. Here, villagers are rebuilding simple crescent-shaped earthen dams that capture monsoon runoff. Much like the Nabateans' microdams, these structures do not create deep reservoirs. Instead, they slow the water's rush, allowing it to seep into the ground and recharge depleted wells. The results have been transformative, bringing vanished streams back to life and restoring water tables, proving that the simplest intervention, slowing water down, can resurrect an entire landscape. Half a world away, on the coastal deserts of Chile, engineers face a different kind of scarcity. Rain almost never falls, but the air is thick with rolling banks of fog. Their solution is a breathtakingly direct form of harvesting. They erect vast, vertical nets, like silent sails on barren hillsides. As the fog sweeps through, tiny droplets condense on the mesh, coalesce, and drip into collection troughs below. This is not capturing floodwater, but it is the same Nabatean principle of comprehensive observation and creative capture applied to a new medium. They are listening to what the environment offers, even when it is invisible moisture in the air, and designing a gentle trap for it. This shift in thinking is moving from the village level to the heart of modern urban planning. Landscape architects and civil engineers now champion a concept called green infrastructure. This approach deliberately moves away from the 20th century model of quickly piping rainwater away through concrete channels and into overwhelmed sewers. Instead, it seeks to mimic ancient, distributed systems. The goal is to slow, spread, and sink water wherever it falls. You see this in the growing use of permeable pavements that allow rain to seep into the ground below parking lots, in the construction of grassy, vegetated ditches that filter and absorb street runoff, and in the deliberate creation of urban wetlands that act as natural sponges during storms. These are not just aesthetic features. They are functional hydrological tools that reduce flooding, filter pollutants, and most importantly, recharge local aquifers. This is precisely what the Nabateans did across the Petra plateau, just translated into the materials and scales of a modern city. Petra, therefore, ceases to be a mere archaeological relic. It becomes a living textbook, a case study in nature-based design. Its genius lies in a framework that is universally applicable. Observe the natural flow, intervene gently to slow and capture it, store it efficiently, distribute it widely, and build in layers of redundancy. As climate change intensifies droughts and amplifies floods, this ancient wisdom offers a powerful alternative to our often brittle, energy-intensive concrete solutions. The question for our century is not whether we have the technology to manage water, but whether we have the humility to learn from those who, 2,000 years ago, mastered the art of thriving within limits. Their legacy flows not in stone, but in the fundamental idea that resilience is found not in conquering nature, but in collaborating with its rhythms. This control over water shaped Petra's social fabric as decisively as it shaped its cliffs. Access was not random or purely egalitarian. It was a carefully managed resource that both reinforced hierarchy and demanded community. The sacred spring of and the primary dams were almost certainly under the direct control of the king and the priestly elite. This was the ultimate source of power, both political and spiritual. By claiming divine sanction for their stewardship of these key sources, the monarchy cemented its authority. Water was not just a commodity, it was a legitimizing force. The ability to grant or withhold access to the most reliable sources, or to prioritize its flow to the grand temples, royal palaces, and the gardens of the wealthy, was a quiet, daily demonstration of who held the keys to life itself. This could be seen as a form of hydraulic monarchy, where control of the resource defined the structure of power. Yet the story is not one of simple top-down oppression. The system's sheer scale and decentralized nature required broad participation. While the elite controlled the major sources, the vast network of secondary channels, neighborhood cisterns, and agricultural terraces operated on a more communal level. Inscriptions from other Nabatean sites detail complex water-sharing agreements and list fines for those who took more than their allotted share or damaged a communal channel. This suggests a society with deeply ingrained rules and a shared understanding that the system's survival depended on everyone's cooperation. Maintaining the miles of channels was likely a civic duty, a form of labor tax where families were responsible for clearing silt from the section nearest their home or field. This created a powerful collective investment. Every citizen, from merchant to mason, had a direct stake in the health of the arteries that passed their doorstep. The water was a commons that required collective guardianship. This created a fascinating social tension, a balance between power and participation. The king may have owned the spring, but the farmer understood the terrace wall that kept his family's field fertile. This dynamic prevented absolute control from becoming absolute fragility. The system's resilience was built on this distributed knowledge and responsibility. If the central authority faltered, the local knowledge of how to manage a cistern or a field channel could persist, allowing communities to adapt. This ancient negotiation mirrors our most pressing modern water conflicts. Is water a public trust, a commons that everyone has a right to and a responsibility for, or is it a private commodity to be owned, controlled, and sold? From debates over bottling groundwater to the management of vast river basins shared by multiple nations, we are still grappling with the same fundamental question the Nabateans answered in stone. How do we balance the need for centralized management with the imperative of shared survival? In Petra, the answer was carved not in proclamations, but in the very design of their world, a system that demanded both a king to guard the source and a community to care for every drop along its journey. The sound of water in Petra was never just a physical fact, it was a sacred hymn. This brings us to their sixth, and perhaps most profound, principle, the seamless integration of the hydraulic with the holy. For the Nabateans, water was not merely a resource to be managed, it was a divine gift to be revered, and this belief was etched into the very layout of their city. Their engineering was an act of worship, and their worship demanded perfect engineering. You can see this sacred geography in the purposeful routing of their channels. Major aqueduct lines did not simply run to public fountains or wealthy homes, they were deliberately directed into the precincts of the great temples. Within these sacred spaces, water would have flowed through ceremonial basins and pools, used for ritual purification before offerings were made to gods like Or-Al. The act of washing was not just about cleanliness, it was a spiritual preparation, a symbolic return to a state of grace enabled by the gods' own bounty. The water itself, having traveled from a blessed spring or captured from the sky, was considered charged with a sacred essence. This ritual use transformed the infrastructure from a utility into a liturgical instrument. Every time a priest or a pilgrim dipped their hands, they were interacting directly with the city's most vital system, a constant, tactile reminder of the covenant between the people, their rulers, and the divine. This spiritual connection extended even to the realm of the departed. Many of the most elaborate tomb facades are strategically positioned near natural seepages or engineered channels, where the slow, constant drip of water would create a soothing, eternal soundscape. Researchers suggest this was intentional. The whisper of water in the silent, sun-baked necropolis would have been a powerful symbol of ongoing life, a promise of spiritual sustenance for those who had passed on. It linked the afterlife with the same generative force that sustained the living city. Water was the thread connecting every phase of existence. This holistic worldview made the maintenance of the water system a non-negotiable religious duty, not just a civic chore. To neglect a settling basin or allow a channel to crack was more than an engineering failure, it was a sacrilege, an insult to the deities who provided the flow. This provided a powerful, unwavering cultural motivation for sustainability that transcended individual lifetimes or political changes. A king might rise and fall, but the duty to care for the gods' water was eternal. This fusion guaranteed consistent, meticulous care across generations. The stonemason repairing an aqueduct wall was not just a laborer, he was a participant in a sacred ritual upholding the cosmic order. The farmer cleaning his terrace channel was ensuring the land's continued fertility as an act of piety. In this worldview, engineering, ecology, and theology were not separate fields. They were different expressions of a single, harmonious truth. The system worked because it was believed to be holy, and it was believed to be holy because it worked. This offers a hauntingly beautiful model for our own time. Our modern sustainability crises are often framed in purely technical or economic terms: carbon credits, efficiency standards, infrastructure grants. But Petra whispers a deeper question. What if the care for our world's systems was woven into our deepest stories and values? What if protecting a watershed or restoring soil was seen not just as environmental policy, but as a sacred obligation to the future? The Nabateans did not sustain their oasis out of fear of scarcity alone, but out of a profound reverence for the source of all life. Their legacy suggests that the most resilient system is one that is loved, not just used. Petra's hidden mastery of the desert invites a fascinating comparison. Around the same time, other great civilizations were also engineering their landscapes to conquer water scarcity, but their solutions reveal starkly different philosophies. To the west, the Roman Empire built its iconic aqueducts, soaring stone arcades marching across valleys. These were monuments of imperial power, designed to convey vast quantities of water over immense distances to supply populous cities, public baths, and lavish fountains. Their purpose was abundance and display, a statement of Rome's ability to reshape geography to its will. In Persia, engineers perfected the conduit, a gently sloping underground tunnel that tapped into mountain aquifers and guided water through many miles of desert without a single drop lost to evaporation. This was a brilliant feat of subterranean surveying, creating sustainable oases for agriculture. Yet its genius was also in its concealment, protecting the vital flow from the harsh surface climate. On the Indian subcontinent, communities constructed breathtaking stepped wells, known as. These were not merely reservoirs. They were ornate, inverted temples carved deep into the earth, with symmetrical staircases descending to the water's edge. They served as cool, communal gathering places and reflected a deep spiritual connection to water as a sacred, social focal point. Petra's system stands apart in this global family of ancient hydraulics. It was neither a monumental conveyance like Rome's, nor a singular, focused structure like a conduit or a stepped well. It was something more holistic and woven. The Nabateans created a decentralized, capillary network that integrated every component of the environment into a single, resilient organism. Unlike the Roman aqueducts, which prioritized moving water from point A to point B with imposing force, Petra's channels were designed for conservation first. Their gentle slopes, settling basins, and widespread cisterns were all about slowing, cleaning, and hoarding every possible drop. The goal was not to flaunt water through public spectacles, though they had fountains, but to hide it away, to bank it in the stone. Their entire approach was adaptive, built in careful dialogue with the specific, violent hydrology of their sandstone canyons. They used what the landscape gave them, carving into existing cliffs and utilizing natural drainage patterns, whereas Roman engineers often imposed a new, geometric order upon the land. This distinction is crucial. The Roman system was an engine of urban expansion, a tool of conquest. Petra's system was an instrument of survival, a pact with a relentless desert. One was built to showcase power, the other was built to ensure permanence through discretion. This focus on resilience over grandeur, on integration over imposition, is what makes the Nabatean achievement so uniquely instructive. It proves that sustainability is not always about the most massive construction, but often about the most intelligent and humble collaboration with a place. In a world facing growing, The quiet, adaptive genius of Petra may hold more relevant secrets for our future than the ruined splendor of the mightiest aqueduct. Yet the grandest dams and longest channels would be useless without a way to deliver their bounty to every home and garden. For this final, capillary action, the Nabateans relied on a technology of elegant simplicity, the pipe. In workshops across Petra, artisans would have shaped local clay into cylindrical sections, each about a foot long and the width of a man's forearm. These were not crude, hand-formed tubes. They were standardized, modular components, fired in kilns to a hard ceramic strength. The genius was in the joint. One end of each pipe was flared slightly wider, like a bell, while the other end remained straight. To assemble a line, a worker would simply insert the straight end of one pipe into the flared bell of the next, creating a snug, overlapping fit. Then they would seal the joint with a thick, waterproof mortar made from lime. This created a continuous, flexible conduit that could snake around corners and follow the gentle slopes of streets without cracking under pressure. The material itself was a perfect match for the environment. Unlike metal, which would corrode in the mineral-rich water, was chemically inert. It did not leach harmful substances or degrade over time. It was also incredibly durable, able to withstand the immense weight of soil above it when buried, and resistant to the root growth of thirsty plants. Most importantly, it was a local solution. The clay came from the surrounding hills. The lime from mortar could be produced by burning local limestone, and the kilns were fueled by wood from the managed forests of the highland terraces. This meant the entire supply chain for the city's vascular system was contained within its own sustainable footprint. A broken section could be identified, dug up, and replaced in a matter of hours with an identical part from a nearby stockpile, minimizing disruption to the flow. This modular, repairable design was a triumph of pragmatic innovation. It demonstrates that the most profound advances are not always in the monumental, but in the perfecting of a humble, scalable component. The pipe was the essential cell in Petra's hydrological body, a repeatable unit of life that allowed the network to grow, adapt, and heal. While we marvel at the soaring facades, it was these unglazed, earth-brown tubes, hidden beneath the streets, that truly carried the pulse of the city from its stone heart to its people's hands. The pipes beneath Petra's streets were not laid in a single grand campaign. They grew. This reveals their seventh, and perhaps most modern, principle: adaptive design over rigid blueprints. The Nabatean water network was not the result of a king's decree drawn on a single sheet of parchment. It was a living system, evolving organically across centuries in a continuous dialogue with the desert itself. Archaeologists have found clear evidence of this iterative genius. In the winding, the main channel's path shows multiple phases of construction and repair. In one section, the original carved trough was later lined with fitted stones to prevent erosion. In another, a secondary bypass channel was added to handle overflow from particularly heavy storms, a clear upgrade made after observing the system's limits. These are not signs of poor planning, but of brilliant responsiveness. The engineers were learning in real time, watching how their creation performed under the desert's extreme tests, and then improving it. This philosophy extended to the entire city's layout. As Petra's population grew and new neighborhoods sprawled across the plateaus, the water network stretched to meet them. A new temple complex meant extending a branch line from a main aqueduct. A cluster of homes on a hillside required a new cistern and a feeder pipe. The system expanded like the roots of a tree, reaching toward need, not according to a predetermined map. This adaptability was their secret weapon against unpredictability. Rainfall patterns shifted over decades. A canyon that once captured ample runoff might silt up, requiring a new dam to be built further upstream. They did not stubbornly cling to an original plan. They observed the change and rerouted their lifeline. This stands in stark contrast to much of our modern infrastructure, which is often designed as a finished, static monument, a dam, a highway, a pipeline, with little capacity for graceful evolution. When conditions change, these rigid systems crack under the strain, requiring enormously expensive and disruptive overhauls. The Nabateans built for change from the very beginning. Their technology was soft, malleable, and patient. A pipe could be dug up and relayed. A low stone dam could be heightened with another course of rocks. A settling basin could be enlarged. Each generation inherited not a frozen artifact, but a toolkit and a tradition of careful modification. This long-term flexibility is a key reason their city thrived for so many centuries. They understood that a system meant to last must be willing to learn, to bend, and to grow alongside the people and the landscape it serves. In their silent, stone ledger of modifications, we find a powerful argument for humility in design. The most enduring solutions are often those that leave room for the wisdom of tomorrow. Buried within the silent cisterns of Petra is a dusty archive, a library written not on parchment, but in layers of silt. When archaeologists first began to carefully excavate these long dry reservoirs, they weren't just clearing debris, they were turning pages in a climate history book. Each flood that entered the Nabatean system carried a tiny, time-stamped sample of its era. As the water slowed in the settling basins, it deposited its cargo. Pollen grains from the plants growing on the plateau, minute fragments of eroded rock, and even isotopes of oxygen and hydrogen atoms from the rain itself. These unassuming particles are the raw data of a science called Paleoclimatology, the study of past climates. By reading this natural ledger, scientists can reconstruct what the world was like centuries before any weather records were kept. In Petra, this archive is uniquely precise. Because the Nabateans dated their construction and maintenance through inscriptions and pottery, researchers can match a specific layer of sediment in a cistern to a known period in the city's history. A thick layer rich in oak pollen tells a story of a wetter climate, with forests thriving on the highlands, leading to abundant runoff and full reservoirs. A sequence of thin, mineral-dense layers, devoid of organic matter, speaks of a prolonged dry period where sparse rains carried little but dust. This turns the entire water system into a highly sensitive environmental recorder. The data reveals that Petra's golden age of expansion, when its grandest tombs were carved and its population peaked, coincided with a centuries-long phase of relatively reliable, though still scarce, rainfall. The system was built during a window of climatic cooperation, but the sediment layers also hold warnings. They show evidence of sudden, catastrophic floods, likely from intense, isolated storms, that would have tested even the Nabateans' brilliant dams. More ominously, they point to periods of extended drought that may have lasted for decades. These dry spells would have placed the entire civilization under immense stress, forcing a greater reliance on their deep cistern reserves and likely straining the social contracts around water sharing. This reframes our understanding of their decline. It wasn't just the earthquake or the shift in trade routes alone. It was likely a devastating convergence, a major seismic event that crippled the infrastructure, followed by a prolonged drought that the damaged system could no longer buffer. The city's resilience, so carefully engineered, met a multi-front assault from both geology and climate. This makes Petra's story far more than a tale of human ingenuity. It becomes a detailed case study in the long-term dialogue between a civilization and a fluctuating planet. Their water network was a continuous negotiation, an adaptive response to the climate's rhythms. When those rhythms changed too drastically, and when the society's capacity to adapt was simultaneously weakened, the dialogue broke down. This ancient data is not just about the past, it is a crucial key for our future. By understanding the natural climate cycles of the region over, scientists can better distinguish between normal variability and the unprecedented shifts driven by human activity today. The layers in Petra's cisterns offer a baseline, a record of how the desert ecosystem functioned before modern intervention. They remind us that climate is not a backdrop, but an active participant in human history. The silent, stratified dust in those stone tanks holds a profound lesson about building in a world of change, a lesson written in the very substance the Nabateans worked so tirelessly to control. The same footsteps that once echoed through the now pose its challenge. Today, Petra welcomes hundreds of thousands of visitors each year, a river of modern explorers whose curiosity is both a tribute and a threat. Each footfall on the ancient pavement, each touch of a carved channel wall, contributes to a slow, cumulative erosion. The very act of admiring this hydraulic genius risks wearing it away. This creates a profound conservation dilemma, a tightrope walk between two vital needs. Do you protect the fragile evidence by reburying it, sealing these stone veins back under the desert to preserve them for future science? Or do you leave them exposed, allowing visitors to witness firsthand the ingenuity that made Petra possible, using that direct connection to build a global constituency for its care? There is no simple answer. Exposed channels are vulnerable to weather, to accidental damage, and to the sheer weight of attention. Yet to hide them risks turning Petra back into a city of mere facades, obscuring the very lesson that makes it relevant to our world today. The solution being pursued is one of meticulous balance and smart management. UNESCO and Jordanian authorities have implemented careful plans to direct the flow of people, creating designated pathways that keep visitors from treading directly on the most delicate hydraulic features. Teams of conservators monitor the site constantly, using sensors and detailed photography to track the tiniest cracks or shifts in the ancient stonework, addressing problems before they grow. Perhaps most promising is the turn toward non-invasive technology for both study and presentation. Ground-penetrating radar and three-dimensional laser scanning allow researchers to map the full extent of buried channels without ever lifting a trowel. These digital models can then be used to create immersive virtual experiences, letting someone explore the complete water system from anywhere in the world, reducing the physical pressure on the site itself. The goal is not to keep people out, but to steward the wonder in. It is a recognition that Petra's true preservation depends on more than just physical repairs. It depends on fostering a deep, informed reverence. Every visitor who learns to see the city not as a dead monument, but as a living lesson in resilience, becomes a guardian of its legacy. The greatest threat is not the tourist's foot, but the unseeing eye. The ongoing work strives to ensure that the story written in stone and channel continues to flow, not into silence, but into the understanding of generations to come. The most brilliant parts of Petra's water network were the ones you could not see. This leads us to their eighth, and perhaps most cunning, principle: invisibility as a strategic asset. The Nabateans did not flaunt their lifeline, they hid it. Channels were carved into the shaded northern walls of canyons, not the sunny southern faces, a deliberate choice to reduce evaporation. Cisterns were not open pools in city squares, but dark, bottle-shaped chambers sealed deep within the living rock of cliffs. Pipes ran beneath streets and courtyards, not along them. This was not an aesthetic preference. It was a calculated, multi-layered defense system for their most precious resource. The first enemy was the desert sun. By burying and covering their water, they minimized the surface area exposed to the dry, scorching air, turning their entire city into a giant subterranean cooler. The second enemy was contamination. A covered channel kept out blowing sand, animal waste, and debris, ensuring the water arriving in homes was clean. But the third and most critical enemy was other people. Petra was a wealthy city on a major trade route, a constant temptation for rivals or raiding tribes. In a siege, an enemy could poison an open well or dam an upstream canal, bringing a city to its knees in days. The Nabateans understood this vulnerability intimately. Their hidden geography turned the water supply into a guarded secret. An invading army marching through would see a magnificent, impregnable city, but they would not see its heart. They would not know which cliff face hid a million-gallon cistern, or which innocent-looking groove in the rock was the inlet to a neighborhood supply. The water was distributed, decentralized, and disguised. To cripple it, an enemy would have to find and destroy dozens, perhaps hundreds, of separate, concealed components, a nearly impossible task. This is a form of security we recognize today in military stealth technology, where survival depends on not being seen. Or in decentralized digital networks designed to withstand attack by having no single point of failure. The Nabateans engineered a hydrological stealth system. Their strength lay in subtlety, not in towering walls alone. They protected their civilization not just by what they built, but by what they chose not to show. This principle whispers a provocative question for our own resource-scarce future. Our modern infrastructure is often proudly visible: massive dams, gleaming treatment plants, elevated highways. We equate security with monumental, hardened fortifications. But what if the safest, most resilient systems are the ones that are unobtrusive, woven quietly into the landscape, and difficult to target? In a world of growing competition for water, the ancient strategy of security through subtlety, of protecting the vital by rendering it invisible, may hold a profound and urgent lesson. The silent precision of their channels hints at a hidden language of numbers and angles. To achieve those perfect, gentle slopes across miles of broken terrain, the Nabateans must have commanded a sophisticated practical geometry, even if they left no textbooks behind. Their mathematical genius was not written on papyrus. It was inscribed directly into the landscape itself. Every consistent gradient, every perfectly rounded cistern, every dam that held against a flood's force, was a solution to a complex equation solved with stone and observation. They likely began with the most fundamental tool, the water level. By filling a long, narrow trench with water and marking points of equal height along its length, they could establish a true horizontal line across any distance. This simple principle, harnessing water's own nature to find level, was the foundation for everything that followed. From this baseline, they could calculate drop. Using sighting poles, straight rods placed at intervals, and perhaps a simple calibrated plumb line, they could measure the subtle decline needed to keep water moving. A drop of 1 meter over 1,000, as seen in the, is a gradient of just 0.1%. Maintaining that imperceptible fall around curves and over uneven rock required not just skill, but a profound intuitive grasp of trigonometry, of angles and distances. They were, in essence, performing land surveying of astonishing accuracy without a single piece of modern equipment. Their calculations extended into 3 dimensions when designing cisterns. To maximize storage while minimizing the surface area exposed to evaporation, they carved bottle-shaped chambers. determining the volume of such an irregular form, and knowing how much waterproof plaster to mix to coat its interior, implies a practical understanding of geometry and capacity. They might have used standardized containers, a certain jar size, to empirically measure the volume of a test pit, then scaled up their calculations. This was mathematics rooted in material reality, learned and refined through the hands. The most elegant aspect of their approach was likely its iterative nature. They built, then they observed. A channel that silted up too quickly was too flat. One that eroded its own walls was too steep. They adjusted, learning from the system's own feedback. This trial-and-error refinement, over generations, encoded a deep wisdom into their community. A master builder could likely look at a canyon and sense the right slope, his knowledge a living library of past successes and corrections. This was applied mathematics in its form, a relentless, collective problem-solving born from absolute necessity. It stands as a powerful reminder that complex engineering can emerge from observation, iteration, and a deep dialogue with the physical world. Their legacy is a testament to the human mind's ability to model reality, to see the invisible forces of gravity and flow, and to shape stone accordingly. They solved for X not with a symbol but with a siphon. Their proofs were not on paper, but in the perpetual, quiet flow of water through a desert city. The stone channels of Petra carried more than just water. They carried the blueprint for an entire living world. To understand the true reach of their hydraulic genius, we must look beyond the cisterns and pipes to the very seeds they nurtured. Archaeologists sifting through ancient trash heaps, the layers of soil in garden terraces, and even the plaster lining of cisterns have uncovered a silent, dusty archive. The botanical remains of Petra's engineered Oasis. These are not grand monuments, but tiny, stubborn witnesses, carbonized seeds, fragments of wood, and microscopic silica skeletons called phytoliths that plants leave behind in soil. Together, they tell a story of astonishing floral ambition. The Nabateans were not merely growing subsistence crops. They were cultivating a carefully curated landscape, a living testament to their system's power and their place in a connected world. The most common finds are the staples of life, robust grains like wheat and barley, along with lentils, figs, dates, and olives. These provided the caloric foundation, the daily bread that sustained the city's population. But mixed among these essentials are surprises that change the entire narrative. Researchers have identified the remains of imported luxury species, plants that had no business thriving in a desert without intense intervention. Evidence points to the cultivation of peaches, a fruit tree native to Persia that requires consistent moisture and careful tending. There are traces of exotic walnuts and possibly even pistachios. These were not survival foods, they were statements. To serve a peach in the desert was to demonstrate a godlike command over nature, a display of wealth and technological prowess as clear as any carved facade. It meant your water system was so reliable, so abundant, that you could afford to divert precious flow to non-essential, thirsty trees simply for their prestige and pleasure. This floral diversity did far more than impress visitors. It actively engineered a better environment. The planting of orchards and vineyards across the terraced plateaus created a feedback loop of resilience. Trees provided shade, reducing ground temperature and evaporation. Their root systems stabilized the soil, preventing erosion from the very water that fed them. Their leaves released moisture into the air, creating slightly more humid microclimates that would have made the city's open spaces more bearable under the brutal sun. This was a form of natural air conditioning, a living infrastructure that amplified the benefits of the hydraulic one. The gardens were also a pharmacy and a sacred space. Pollen and seed evidence suggests the cultivation of medicinal herbs like coriander, cumin, and fenugreek, plants used in ancient remedies and cooking. Certain fragrant flowers or resins may have been grown for use in the temples, for anointing oils or ceremonial incense, linking the productivity of the earth directly to spiritual practice. Each seed, each fragment of pollen, is a data point in a larger picture. It paints Petra not as a barren red rock city, but as a verdant, biodiverse haven consciously constructed. The Nabateans did not find an oasis. They built one from the ground up, layer by layer, channel by channel, seed by seed. The proof is in the peach stone discarded 2,000 years ago, a tiny, stubborn symbol of a civilization that did not just endure the desert, but persuaded it to bloom. Every peach grown in a Petra garden, every ornate pot fired in a kiln, began with a single, controlled drop. This brings us to their ninth principle, a radical economic insight. Water was not just a resource to be consumed, it was capital to be invested. The Nabateans performed a profound alchemy, transforming a natural constraint into the very foundation of their wealth and geopolitical power. They created a monopoly on desert hydration. Imagine a caravan of 100 camels, each laden with frankincense and myrrh, emerging from a week-long journey across the waterless expanse. Their most desperate need was not for a market, but for a drink. At Petra, they found it, but at a price. The city levied taxes on goods in transit, but its most potent leverage was the water itself. By controlling the only reliable source for hundreds of miles, the Nabateans could effectively set the toll for safe passage. This was an economic model built on absolute necessity. Caravans had no alternative, and that gave Petra immense negotiating power. The wealth generated was not merely collected, it was strategically reinvested into the system that produced it. Taxes paid for the maintenance of dams, the cleaning of channels, and the salaries of the hydrologists who kept the flow precise. This created a virtuous cycle, where commercial success directly funded hydrological resilience, which in turn guaranteed more commercial success. But the economic impact flowed far beyond caravan taxes. Reliable water enabled a diverse, specialized urban economy to flourish. Think of the pottery workshops, their kilns firing the very pipes that brought them water. A single large cistern required thousands of these pipes, supporting entire guilds of potters, clay miners, and kiln operators. The water also sustained craft industries like stone carving, metalworking, and textile dyeing, each process requiring consistent moisture. This allowed for a large population of non-farming specialists, artisans, merchants, administrators, soldiers, and priests, to live and work within the city walls. Petra was not an agrarian society with a small elite. It was a complex, pre-industrial urban center, and its water network was the factory floor. The parallel to our modern world is striking. Today, economic zones and tech hubs cluster not around mineral wealth, but around infrastructure, reliable power, data bandwidth, and yes, water security. The Nabateans understood this dynamic too ago. They turned their hidden pipes into the equivalent of a modern port, a financial district, and an industrial park all in one. Their mastery was a lesson in resource-based economics. They did not just have water, they had the exclusive right to distribute it in an otherwise barren corridor of the world. This control translated directly into political influence, allowing them to negotiate as equals with empires like Rome and Ptolemaic Egypt. Their greatest source of strength was invisible, flowing silently beneath the feet of the merchants who paid for its privilege. In the end, the rose-red city was not built on spice, but on a much more elemental currency, one they learned to bank in stone and spend with breathtaking strategic wisdom. The city's true voice was not the chatter of markets, but the quiet murmur of water moving through stone. This was an acoustic landscape, a constant sensory backdrop that wove the miracle of engineering into the fabric of daily awareness. In the cool shade of the main channel would have produced a gentle, metallic trickle, a sound both soothing and precise, marking the steady pulse of the city's lifeline. High in the necropolis, near the grandest tombs, the deliberate placement of channels meant that the slow, rhythmic drip of water into a carved basin would have echoed in the silent spaces. A perpetual offering of sound to accompany the resting. For the living, these sounds were more than just noise, they were vital information. A maintainer walking the length of an aqueduct did not need to see a blockage to find it. His ears would guide him. The healthy hum of a full channel would shift to a hollow gurgle where silt had built up, or fall silent altogether where a crack had drained the flow. The roar of water entering a diversion tunnel during a distant storm would be a signal to check the settling basins downstream. The acoustic profile of their water was a diagnostic tool, a living readout of the system's health understood by every trained ear. In sacred spaces, this sound took on a deeper resonance. Within temple complexes, where water flowed through ceremonial pools and fountains, its auditory presence was likely part of the ritual. The soft cascade in a courtyard would have masked worldly distractions, creating a sonic veil that separated the sacred from the profane, focusing the mind. The act of purification would have been accompanied by its own soundtrack, the pour of water over hands, the drip into a basin, each sound a step in a spiritual sequence. This intertwining of the auditory and the divine transformed functional infrastructure into an instrument of worship. The city itself became a kind of temple, with water its chanting choir. To walk through Petra at its height was to be immersed in this hydraulic symphony. From the distant rumble of a managed flood in a canyon, to the cheerful babble of a public fountain in a sun-drenched plaza, to the almost inaudible seep within a sealed cistern. These layers of sound created a profound sense of security and order. They were the audible proof of the covenant between the people and their engineered environment. The silence we experience in the ruins today is therefore a profound distortion. It flattens our understanding into mere visuals, stripping away the vital, reassuring dimension that made Petra feel alive. To truly comprehend this place, we must listen for the echoes in the empty channels, and hear not just the absence, but the memory of a soundscape that meant survival, ceremony, and home. Yet even the most elegant design meets its breaking point. For all its resilience, Petra's water network was not a perfect, unbroken machine. Its stone veins held failures, and in those fractures, we find lessons as valuable as the successes. One of the most persistent challenges was one they engineered to solve: silt. In certain side canyons, where the terrain flattened out before reaching the main channels, archaeologists have found evidence of chronic, overwhelming sedimentation. Here, the settling basins were too small or too infrequently cleaned, and the gentle slope was not enough to keep the fine, abrasive particles moving. Over decades, these stretches would have clogged completely, creating stagnant ponds that evaporated in the sun or forced the water to carve new, destructive paths outside the engineered channels. This was a failure of maintenance logistics, not hydraulic principle. It teaches a stark truth. A system designed to capture silt must also have a relentless, organized plan for removing it. Without that sustained human ritual, the very mechanism of capture becomes a mechanism of self-burial. Another profound vulnerability lay in their material choice. The pipes, so perfect for resisting corrosion, had a critical weakness: brittleness. In areas where the ground was unstable or where heavy traffic passed above, archaeologists have found pipes shattered by subsidence or pressure. A single broken section could drain an entire branch line, and while repairable, it required immediate detection and a skilled crew to dig down and replace the module. This shows the inherent trade-off in any engineering decision. The Nabateans chose a material that was chemically eternal but physically fragile, betting on a stable environment and rapid response. When those conditions changed, the pipes became a liability. The most dramatic failures, however, are written in the scars of earthquakes. The Great Quake of 363 AD left clear evidence in the hydraulic skeleton. In the sections of the raised aqueduct clinging to the cliff face were shaken from their mounts and lie today where they fell, never reset. A major dam protecting a northern entrance was cracked at its foundation, its spillway misaligned, and the repair attempt is visibly crude, a patchwork of mismatched stone that lacked the original interlocking precision. This was likely a desperate, under-resourced fix by a society that no longer had the deep bench of master stonemasons the project once required. These unrepaired or poorly repaired points are perhaps the most instructive of all. They reveal that the system's ultimate point of failure was not the stone or the clay, but the social and institutional capacity to care for it. The technology could withstand a seismic shock, but the community's ability to mobilize the knowledge, labor, and resources for a full recovery could not. What do these ancient failures tell our modern engineers? First, that maintenance is not a secondary concern. It is a primary design parameter. A dam must be designed not just to hold water, but to be easily inspected and repaired. Second, material selection is always a compromise, and the environmental stresses, from seismic activity to freeze-thaw cycles, must be anticipated with brutal honesty. Third, and most importantly, resilience must be designed into the social structure as much as the physical one. A system that requires specialized knowledge to fix must also have a clear, funded pathway to pass that knowledge on. Petra's broken channels remind us that vulnerability is not the opposite of ingenuity, it is its constant companion. Every brilliant solution creates new, often hidden, points of stress. The legacy of great engineering is not found solely in what worked flawlessly, but in understanding why, eventually, some parts did not. And what that silent testimony demands of us as we build our own world upon an uncertain earth. The final, and perhaps most humbling principle etched into Petra's stone is not about engineering at all. It is about time. The Nabateans operated on a scale we struggle to comprehend today. They built and maintained their hydraulic civilization with a time horizon spanning centuries, a mindset of profound intergenerational stewardship. Every channel they carved, every cistern they sealed, was an act of faith in a future they would never see. Their labor was not for themselves alone, but for yet unborn, for a city meant to outlast dynasties and outlive memory. This was a covenant with the future, written in waterproof plaster and graded stone. Consider the patience it required. A master hydrologist would spend a lifetime learning the subtle signs of the watershed from his predecessor, only to pass that knowledge to an apprentice who would guard it for another 50 years. The fruit trees they planted on the high terraces might not bear a significant harvest for a decade. The slow, deliberate construction of a dam was a project that could outlast its original architect. Their entire society was calibrated for the long arc, where success was measured not in quarterly gains, but in the perpetual, quiet flow of water through the 100 years hence. This stands in stark contrast to the short-termism that often governs our modern relationship with critical resources. We manage water tables with annual budgets. We build infrastructure with measured in decades, and we make political decisions bounded by electoral cycles. Our systems are engineered for immediate efficiency and cost saving, often at the expense of long-term resilience. The Nabateans made the opposite calculation. They invested immense upfront effort and resources into a system whose ultimate payoff was its own enduring existence. They understood that true sustainability is not a technical specification, but a cultural commitment, a promise made by one generation to the next that the world they leave behind will not be impoverished, but enriched. This long view is what transformed their work from mere construction into a legacy. It invites a piercing question for our own moment in history. What are we building today that will be seen 1,000 years from now as a marvel of foresight? What covenant with the future are we etching, not in stone, but in our policies, our technologies, and our daily choices? The silent, enduring gift of Petra is not just a lesson in hydrology, but a challenge to our perception of time itself. It asks us to look past the horizon of our own lives and build for a world we can only imagine, trusting that those who come after will understand the care woven into the foundations we laid. The silent channels now find their voice through the glow of a screen. Using three-dimensional laser scans and drone mapping, archaeologists have built a perfect digital twin of Petra, a virtual city where every cliff, canyon, and carved conduit is rendered with millimeter precision. This is not just a model for viewing, it is a laboratory for discovery. By applying the laws of physics within this virtual space, a field called computational fluid dynamics, researchers can pour digital water into the system and watch it flow. They can simulate a century's worth of flash floods in an afternoon, observing exactly where the water wants to go, where it pools, and where the energy of a torrent would have stressed the ancient stone. This digital experimentation has solved long-standing puzzles. For years, a particular cistern near the city center seemed oddly isolated, its feeder channel lost to time. Running the simulation revealed a subtle, buried dip in the terrain that would have naturally funneled rooftop runoff from an entire neighborhood directly into its mouth. A connection invisible to the naked eye but obvious to the algorithm. The models have also tested the Nabateans' legendary precision. By digitally adjusting the slope of the aqueduct by mere fractions of a degree, engineers can see the consequences. A steeper slope causes turbulent, erosive flow that would have quickly damaged the channel. A flatter one leads to immediate silt buildup and stagnation. The simulation confirms that the Nabateans found the perfect gradient, a sweet spot that kept water moving with calm, clear purpose. These tools bridge, allowing a modern engineer to collaborate with an ancient counterpart. We can now ask the system questions it has waited 2,000 years to answer, and in its silent, digital flow, we find a deeper appreciation for the sophistication woven into every stone. This virtual resurrection does more than solve mysteries, it restores the wonder, letting us witness the lifeblood of Petra pulse once more. The water flowing through Petra's stone veins also flowed through its imagination. Beyond the channels and cisterns, the Nabatean relationship with this vital element was immortalized in their art, transforming a practical triumph into a powerful cultural language. On the sheer rock faces surrounding the city, alongside the grand tomb facades, you find simpler, more personal carvings. These are not portraits of kings, but symbols, stylized, wavy lines representing flowing water or depictions of simple cups and vessels. These graffiti-like inscriptions are believed to be votive offerings, a way for ordinary individuals to give thanks for the blessing of a reliable spring or a full household cistern. The art was an expression of gratitude, a public acknowledgement that their survival was not an accident, but a managed miracle worthy of commemoration. This symbolism carried into their crafted goods. On the fine, thin-walled pottery for which they were renowned, painters often used motifs of nets, waves, and undulating lines. A water jar itself might be decorated with images of what it was meant to hold, a beautiful meta-statement about its purpose. These designs were more than decoration. They were a constant visual reminder, a daily reinforcement of the resource that defined their existence. But the most potent and public use of this iconography was struck in metal. Nabataean coins, the instruments of their robust economy, frequently bore aquatic symbols. Some featured the image of a dolphin, a creature of the pure, open sea, a surprising choice for a desert-dwelling people. Others showed stylized waves or anchors. To the merchants and travelers who used this currency, the message was unmistakable. The prosperity this coin could buy was directly linked to the Nabatean mastery of the aquatic realm. The dolphin did not represent a nearby ocean. It symbolized the life-giving flow they had engineered in the heart of the desert. This was brilliant propaganda. By placing these symbols on coinage, the ruling elite permanently associated their authority with the provision of life itself. Holding a Nabatean coin was holding a tiny, metallic promise of stability. It communicated that the kingdom's power guaranteed the water that made trade and settlement possible. The king was not just a political leader, he was the chief hydrologist, the guardian of the source. This iconography served to legitimize his rule and unify the population around a shared, vital identity. They were not merely traders or carvers of stone, they were the people who commanded the desert's hidden tides. In this artistic elevation, we see the full circle of their genius. They took a relentless physical necessity, the need for water, and through engineering made it reliable. Then, through art and symbolism, they made it sacred and synonymous with their power. The practical became the poetic, the hydrological became the heraldic. Their greatest source of strength was thus celebrated in every transaction, on every shelf, and in every silent prayer carved into a cliff, proving that the true depth of a civilization is measured not just by what it builds, but by what it chooses to worship. The silent engineering that sustained Petra for centuries would later fuel its legend in a very different form. In the winter of 1845, a young English poet named John William, who had never set foot in Arabia, penned a sonnet for a university prize. His entry, simply titled Petra, won not for its archaeological accuracy, but for a single, immortal line. He described it as a rose-red city half as old as time. That phrase, detached from its original context, took on a life of its own. It crystallized the Western world's romantic vision of Petra not as a living, breathing metropolis, but as a timeless, mysterious ruin. This poem, filled with allusions to biblical and divine judgment, framed the city as a monument to a vanished, almost mythical people. It was a place of awe and desolation, its true story of human ingenuity replaced by a haunting, beautiful mystery. This poetic reframing was powerful because it spoke to a deep human longing. The idea of a lost city, carved from living rock and swallowed by the desert, was more compelling than the complex reality of water management and civic planning. The myth was born from what visitors could not see. The empty, silent channels and dry cisterns were invisible to the early explorers and artists. What they saw and what they marveled at were the monumental facades, the treasury, the monastery, the tombs, standing in majestic isolation. These structures seemed to have sprung from the rock by magic, not by the sustained labor of a hydrated civilization. The very invisibility of the water system, its greatest strategic strength, became the source of its greatest historical oversight in the popular imagination. It created a perfect blank canvas for projection. For Victorian audiences, Petra became a symbol of transience, a lesson in the inevitable decay of empires. For later generations, it would become something else entirely, the ultimate cinematic treasure vault. This transition from poetic symbol to pop culture icon reached its zenith in 1989. In Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the filmmakers used Petra's actual treasury facade as the fictional canyon of the Crescent Moon, the hiding place of the Holy Grail. The sequence is a masterpiece of adventure cinema. Indy and his father race through the narrow, winding, which is portrayed not as a hydrological artery, but as a perilous gauntlet. They emerge into the sunlight to behold the breathtaking facade, the goal of their quest. The film captures the visceral thrill of discovery perfectly, but it also reinforces the old, incomplete myth. The city is a backdrop, a beautiful, empty stage for a supernatural treasure hunt. The life that once filled it, the sound of water in channels, the chatter in the gardens, the commerce in the streets, is absent. The genius that made human settlement possible there is irrelevant to the plot. Only the carved stone matters as a setting for fantasy. This portrayal, seen by millions, cemented an image. Petra became synonymous with a single, dramatic reveal. Yet in that very focus on the monumental, the film unintentionally highlights the same disconnect that's poetry did a century before. We are enchanted by the grand facade, but we are not prompted to ask how 30,000 people drank, bathed, and farmed behind it. The hydrological reality is buried under layers of compelling fiction. This journey from Nabatean engineering to Victorian poetry to Hollywood blockbuster reveals a fascinating pattern. The aspects of a civilization that are most vital to its daily existence are often the least glamorous to later storytellers. We memorialize the pyramids, not the grain silos that fed the workers. We admire the Colosseum, not the aqueduct that supplied its fountains. Petra's water system was its grain silo, its aqueduct, the foundational, humble miracle that enabled everything else. Its obscurity in our popular myths is not an accident, but a testament to its success. It worked so seamlessly, it was designed to be so unobtrusive that it disappeared from the story. The legends that grew in its place, of rose-red cities and hidden grails, are in a way the ultimate tribute. They are the stories we tell when the true mechanics of survival are too ordinary, too brilliantly efficient to capture our wonder, but they also serve as a gentle caution. When we look at the wonders of the ancient world, or even at the complex systems of our own, we must train ourselves to see past the facade. The grandest legends are often built upon the quietest, most essential truths, flowing just out of sight. The same desert sun that once challenged the Nabateans now threatens their legacy with new intensity. Climate change is rewriting the rules of aridity in Jordan, presenting Petra with a dual threat that mirrors its ancient paradox, but with greater force. Scientists project a future of fewer rainy days, but when the rains do come, they are likely to be more violent, concentrated bursts. This means longer, more punishing droughts that bake the stone, followed by sudden, overwhelming flash floods that carry unprecedented energy. These are not the predictable patterns the Nabateans spent generations learning to manage. A single catastrophic flood, amplified by a warmer atmosphere's capacity to hold more moisture, could in hours undo centuries of preservation work. Scouring away fragile archaeological layers or collapsing already weakened structures. The increased frequency of such extreme weather events does not allow the landscape, or the ruins, time to recover. It is a stress test for which these ancient stones were never designed. confronting the system with the very forces it once mastered, now operating outside historical bounds. The response to this modern crisis is drawing inspiration from the past itself. Conservationists are looking at the Nabatean toolkit not as a relic, but as a playbook. One promising strategy involves using the principle of slowing and spreading water on a massive scale. Plans are being developed to construct modern, reinforced versions of the Nabatean diversion, dams and terraces in the highland catchment areas above the city. These interventions would not be made of stone, but of textiles and reinforced concrete designed to blend with the landscape. Their goal, however, is ancient: to gently dissipate the energy of a modern superflood before it reaches the fragile and the city center, spreading and sinking the water to recharge the aquifer, just as the original system did. This is not mere imitation. It is adaptive translation, applying a 2,000-year-old hydrological philosophy with 21st-century materials to solve a 21st-century problem. Alongside these physical safeguards, a digital nervous system is being woven over the ruins. The creation of a comprehensive digital twin, constantly updated by drone surveys and ground sensors, allows for predictive preservation. Moisture sensors embedded in critical walls can detect the faintest seepage long before human eyes see a stain. Accelerometers can measure the subtlest vibration from tourist footfall or distant tremors. By feeding this real-time data into the virtual model, conservators can run simulations, asking the digital Petra to show them where the next major flood will hit hardest, or which cliff face is most vulnerable after 5 years of intensified drought. This allows for preemptive, targeted reinforcement, shoring up a wall before it cracks, or clearing a hidden channel before the next storm turns it into a destructive torrent. The marriage of ancestral wisdom and artificial intelligence creates a powerful new form of resilience, a sentinel system watching over the past with the tools of the future. Preserving Petra's water system has therefore transcended archaeology. It has become a critical, living case study in climate adaptation. The site is a laboratory where we are learning how to protect vulnerable cultural heritage from the escalating impacts of a changing planet, lessons that apply to historic cities from Venice too. But the implications run deeper still. As regions around the world face their own intensifying cycles of drought and deluge, the Nabatean approach, decentralized, gravity-fed, and focused on slowing, spreading, and sinking water, offers a compelling alternative to our often brittle, energy-intensive concrete infrastructure. The work at Petra is no longer just about saving old stones. It is about reactivating an ancient dialogue with a hostile environment, listening once more to the wisdom in the gradient of a channel and the shape of a cistern. To write a new manual for survival in an increasingly arid world, the silent pipes are being asked to speak again, not of a lost past, but of a possible future. Petra's final lesson flows not from its grandest facade, but from its quietest corners. As our exploration draws to a close, the rose-red city sheds its mythic silence. It is no longer a tomb in the desert, but a whispering testament. Every carved channel, every hidden cistern, speaks a language of patient observation, graceful adaptation, and a profound, hard-won respect for a single, scarce resource. The greatest mystery here was never about lost treasure, but about a sustained conversation with an unforgiving land. It was solved not with magic, but with the practical, brilliant wisdom of survival. This hidden water system invites us to see with Nabatean eyes, to look at our own environments, our own looming constraints of water and climate, not as dead ends, but as fields of potential. It challenges us to build systems that do not fight nature's logic, but collaborate with it, designing for resilience over mere efficiency, for community access over isolated control, and for the quiet needs of future generations over the noisy demands of the immediate present. The true wonder of Petra is that its most vital innovation was invisible. It worked so seamlessly that for centuries, we admired the monument but missed the mechanism. That is perhaps the most important insight of all. The solutions that sustain a civilization are often humble, woven into the fabric of daily life, designed to be felt but not seen. They are covenants with the future, etched in waterproof plaster and graded stone. If this journey through the veins of a desert city has captivated you, we would love to hear your thoughts. Which ancient innovation, from any corner of the world, most amazes you with its foresight and elegance? Share your reflections in the comments below, and if you wish to delve deeper into the mysteries that have shaped our world, consider subscribing. For in understanding how others thrived within their limits, we may just find the inspiration to thrive within our own.